Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into a world where your comfortable mattress, your temperature-controlled room, your toothpaste, and even your Netflix-induced procrastination simply do not exist. Imagine your eyelids half closed, your body already relaxing, and suddenly, poof, you're no longer in your bedroom, but standing awkwardly in the 14th century, in a place where survival isn't just unlikely, it's honestly not looking good for you. There's a damp chill to the air. The scent of wood smoke and animals blends around you, and the first thing your modern brain whispers is, "I'm pretty sure I've made a mistake." You're surrounded by small timber houses, muddy paths, chickens who don't respect personal space, and strangers wearing clothes that look equal parts itchy and suspiciously flammable. And just so you know, historians estimate that up to half of medieval children never reached adulthood. So yes, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and comment your location and your local time, just for fun, so we can imagine a map of sleepy humans drifting off across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a rutted dirt path, and the first thing you become aware of is noise, not loud city traffic, but an overlapping soundtrack of animal calls, wooden wheels, distant hammering, gossip murmurs, and the occasional baby crying like it already understands it was born into a DLC where everything is set to hard mode. You instinctively check your pockets for your phone, but there's nothing there. No screen, no flashlight, no Google Maps, no translation app, no emergency pizza delivery shortcut. Instead, your hands brush against rough cloth, and for a moment, you genuinely wonder whether you're just dreaming, sleepwalking, or being featured in a questionable reality show. You look around and realize there are no street signs, no posted directions, no glowing storefront logos, and absolutely no explanation for where you are. Instead, a small cluster of people nearby glance at you with suspicion, because in this era, strangers are not met with, "Hi, welcome," energy. They are met with a quiet calculation of whether you are harmless, a threat, or possibly a demon who got lost on the way to a dramatic church sermon. This isn't paranoia. Medieval villages were tight-knit, and outsiders were often perceived as potential carriers of disease, trouble, or very poorly timed prophecies. Your shoes, if you still have them, are immediately wrong for the terrain. Imagine stepping into deep mud that has the texture and emotional commitment of chocolate pudding but smells like barnyard disappointment. And while modern documentaries show medieval towns as nostalgic stone fantasies, real places had a much less Instagram-worthy polish. Historical records suggest that many rural communities never exceeded a few hundred residents, which means everyone knows everyone, their grandparents, their livestock, and their scandal history. If you sneeze, the entire village will have theories by lunchtime. You feel a little hunger pang, so instinctively you think of snacks. Except, there are no snacks. There is no corner shop selling chips, no vending machine with questionable granola bars, and definitely no iced coffee served in a recyclable cup adorned with a motivational quote. There's just life, raw, unfiltered, unplugged. A light drizzle begins to fall, and you expect to see someone whip out an umbrella, but those weren't common tools here. People simply continue with their tasks because chores don't pause for weather. A woman carries water from a communal well, balancing the bucket as though gravity signed a personal agreement with her. A few boys chase a pig, which honestly looks like it's winning. A dog sniffs at your shoes, judging you silently. And suddenly you realize you are the least knowledgeable person in this world. Despite coming from the future with thousands of years of accumulated information, none of which is useful without internet access, proper tools, or sanitation. You take a deep breath, and the air is noticeably smoky, earthy, and slightly sour, like someone mixed rain with livestock and called it a fragrance. And yes, that's normal. In fact, historical accounts indicate that many medieval homes had open hearths with no chimneys, causing smoke to accumulate inside like a very committed houseguest. Historians still argue whether the constant inhalation contributed to longer immunity or simply created a generation that powered through smoke like it was medieval aromatherapy. As you stand there absorbing everything, your brain tries to negotiate, maybe I can adapt. Then you realize, you don't know how to start a fire without tools. You don't know the edible plants from the congratulations, you're hallucinating now plants. You cannot hunt, milk a cow, or build a shelter using anything other than IKEA assembly instructions. Your handwriting, if legible, makes you a prodigy here, but literacy doesn't feed you. Someone approaches, a villager who looks to be in their late 30s, but may actually be 24 because medieval aging runs on fast-forward settings. Their clothing is brown and practical, their expression careful, and their first question is not, "Where are you from?" but something closer to, "Are you dangerous or contagious?" They speak Middle English, a chaotic linguistic cousin of modern English, and though you understand about 30%, it feels like listening to someone speak English while chewing marbles soaked in poetry. You try to respond, maybe with a friendly smile, but smiling too much here can look untrustworthy. You try a neutral, mildly confused expression, which seems to work. They gesture to a building, a modest timber-framed house with wattle and daub walls, and for lack of any better plan, you follow. Inside, the floor is earthen, the lighting comes from a small flame that flickers like it's auditioning for a horror film, and there's a faint scent of herbs hanging from the ceiling. For a moment, it feels cozy, simple but lived in, like a rustic Airbnb without Wi-Fi, reviews, or fire safety compliance. You spot a woolen blanket, rough wooden stools, and a small table built by someone who probably did not believe in straight angles as a concept. You hear a distant bell from outside, a signal marking time, because clocks are rare luxuries. Even though you're tired, you don't dare sit yet. You're still processing. And in the middle of all this sensory overload, your modern mind sneaks in one last whisper. I definitely should have watched more survival tutorials instead of cat videos. You stand there, still absorbing the smoky air and questionable flooring situation, when your stomach gently reminds you that it operates strictly on 21st century scheduling and expects snacks, variety, and preferably something with cheese. But here, in this world of hand-to-mouth survival, food is not a casual pastime or a personality trait. It's an ongoing negotiation between nature, luck, and whether someone managed not to burn the last pot of pottage. You look around, hoping for a menu, or at least a mildly enthusiastic street vendor yelling about roasted something or other, but no. There is only routine, scarcity, and culinary creativity driven by necessity rather than passion. Someone hands you a wooden bowl, and inside is a thick beige substance known as pottage, a medieval meal so common that if it had a social media presence, it would be labeled default settings activated. It's a stewish mixture of grains, vegetables, and occasionally small bits of meat if fortune leans your way. The texture is somewhere between oatmeal and wet clay, and the color looks like a warm compromise. Still, you're starving, so you raise the spoon to your mouth and taste it. It's fine. Not delicious, but edible. Not poison, probably. It's like a bowl of participation award nutrition. Historically, pottage was eaten daily for centuries because it was cheap, filling, and flexible enough to survive nearly any combination of leftovers. And honestly, you respect its resilience. But don't expect variety. There's no pottage of the day chalkboard menu and no friendly server saying, "Would you like to upgrade your portion for 2 copper coins?" The medieval diet, especially for peasants, was deeply repetitive. Bread, grains, root vegetables, maybe some beans, and once in a great while, meat. Meat is like the limited edition sneaker drop of diet culture here. Rare, exciting, and probably reserved for someone with better connections than you. You quickly learn that access to animals doesn't guarantee access to animal products, because livestock are valuable working assets, not refrigerator inventory. You think about your modern dinner obsessions. Pizza nights, fusion cuisine, those bizarre food trends where someone deep fries a perfectly innocent ingredient for clout. But in this era, food is fuel, not entertainment. There's no professional culinary industry, no celebrity chefs wearing spotless aprons, and no farm-to-table gastropub with artisanal pickles and overpriced rustic plates. You glance outside again and notice how close animals live to humans. Chickens wander freely, a goat stares at you like you owe it rent, and somewhere nearby, a pig snorts with the confidence of a creature who knows its life path is unpredictable. And here comes a quirky tidbit. In some medieval households, eggs were so valuable that people sometimes loaned their hens to neighbors, essentially renting temporary access to breakfast potential. You can almost hear a villager casually negotiating like, "I'll return your chicken Wednesday, assuming it honors the egg schedule." Soon your mind drifts to dessert, because what is life without something sweet? But here, refined sugar isn't just rare, it's luxury item rare, the medieval equivalent of finding a brand new smartphone in a cereal box. Most people rely on honey, if they can get it, and dessert might simply mean today the food didn't taste like yesterday's food. Your modern sweet tooth quietly sobs into the medieval void. Feeling bold, you ask about spices. The reaction you receive suggests you may as well have asked for a unicorn smoothie. Spices exist, yes, but only in the realm of the wealthy, traders, or someone who lucked into a merchant caravan. Pepper, cinnamon, and ginger traveled long distances and were often worth more per ounce than silver. While you once complained about a $6 latte, here you'd guard pepper the way modern people protect their Wi-Fi passwords. As you continue eating, you try not to think about food safety, but you're failing spectacularly. There are no expiration labels, no regulated food handling, and no temperature-controlled storage. Salting, smoking, fermenting, and drying are common preservation methods, but they're not foolproof. You'll remember hearing somewhere that medieval bread was sometimes bulked up using ground beans, peas, or even ground tree bark during famine years. Historians still argue whether bark bread was a desperate myth or something that genuinely appeared in the bleakest famine conditions. But either way, you're suddenly grateful for every sandwich you've ever had. You take another mouthful of pottage and realize the taste improves slightly if you pretend it's comfort food. It's warm, filling, and carries the subtle smoky flavor of the fire it simmered over for hours, possibly days. Medieval kitchens didn't cook fast. They cooked continually, with pots left warming all day so anyone returning from work could take a scoop. There's something strangely cozy about it, even if it's not Michelin star material. Truthfully, if this existed today in an expensive hipster cafe, someone would call it heritage slow food grain broth and charge $14. While eating, you observe meal etiquette, or rather, the lack of modern table rules. People share from the same pot, double dipping without shame, because microbes are still mysterious and not yet celebrities with Latin names. You're also sharing the room with hovering smoke, the occasional insect, and a cat that looks personally offended it wasn't served first. Still, the atmosphere is companionable in its own rough-around-the-edges way. Then comes another shock. Breakfast wasn't always a standard meal here. Many medieval people ate just 2 meals a day, one mid-morning, one at dusk, with maybe a small bite in between if available. There was no daily breakfast toast ritual, no cereal mascots yelling at children, and no brunch culture posing for aesthetic Instagram photos. If you try to suggest avocado toast, the villagers will look at you like you're naming a type of demon. And as you sit there scraping the last bit of pottage, you ask yourself a philosophical question that transcends time. Would I rather have boring food that keeps me alive or exciting food with questionable consequences? Here, survival wins. Pleasure is optional, practicality is mandatory, and snacks are fictional luxuries. Before you can overthink it, someone casually hands you a piece of coarse brown bread, dense, slightly sour, and baked using medieval yeast strains that would make modern bakers cry into their sourdough starters. But surprisingly, it tastes real, honest, like the earth wants you to stay grounded, literally and metaphorically. And right as you consider asking whether medieval people ever complained about mealtime boredom, you realize that when you're perpetually hungry, repetition tastes better than nothing at all. Food isn't an event, it's survival with flavor-optional settings. You've just finished your humble bowl of medieval pottage, and while you're not exactly satisfied, you're at least not fainting from hunger. Naturally, your next instinct is to look for something to drink. Maybe your brain imagines a cute clay mug of fresh, cold, crisp water that tastes like a mountain spring commercial. But this is where your modern expectations and medieval reality have the emotional compatibility of a microwave and a wooden spoon. Here, clean drinking water isn't a guarantee. It's practically a fantasy with plot armor. You look around the room, noticing there's no pitcher, no jug with a cork, no convenient little water station. Instead, your host gestures toward a large wooden bucket and a ladle that looks like it's seen more lives than a medieval cat. You lean in to inspect it, and immediately your inner modern germ detector blares like a silent emergency alarm. The water looks cloudy, like it forgot its skincare routine. Tiny floating specks drift lazily across the surface, and the bottom of the bucket has sediment that resembles powdered mystery. And that exact moment, is when it hits you that your stomach might be a liability here. Because in medieval Europe, water sources were often contaminated by waste, runoff, animals, or whatever surprise the weather decided to deliver that morning. Wells were common, yes, but so were accidental seepages from nearby cesspits, and that's a sentence nobody wants near their beverage description. So instead of reaching for that ladle, you wisely hesitate. Your host, noticing your hesitation, offers you a different option. A small mug of ale, or perhaps weak beer, known historically as small ale. And yes, it's absolutely normal here to drink beer more often than water, even if it's breakfast time, mid-morning, snack time, or whatever counts as hydration break. Because alcohol, even in mild form, helps kill bacteria that water alone cannot. This means you might join children, adults, and elderly villagers who all sip small ale like it's the medieval version of filtered water with a brand logo and influencer discount code. Historians still debate whether everyone was actually mildly buzzed all day, or if the alcohol content was so low that it was basically a lukewarm, malty tea of survival. But the consensus is that it was safer than dirty water. And honestly, safety beats sobriety right now. You take a sip of the ale. It's lukewarm because refrigeration hasn't even been invented yet, and medieval people didn't develop the modern emotional dependency on ice cubes. The flavor is malty, slightly sour, a bit earthy, and it tastes like a historical documentary smells. It's not refreshing in the modern sense, but it is wet, and it is far less likely to turn your digestive system into a medieval tragedy. You take one more cautious sip, trying to convince your taste buds that it's a rustic craft brew instead of practical liquid necessity. Of course, not everyone drank ale. In some regions, people drank cider, mead, buttermilk, or diluted wine depending on climate, economy, and local crops. But fresh milk? That wasn't a daily comfort either. Milk spoiled fast, and without refrigeration, it was usually turned into cheese or butter as quickly as possible. Drinking raw milk could be risky, though some did, especially children. But again, your modern digestive system is still writing emails of complaint. Feeling curious, you step outside to see where water actually comes from. A group of villagers walked to a communal well with wooden buckets, rope, and muscles earned through daily life, not gym membership. Wells were common in communities lucky enough to have access. Otherwise, people fetched water from rivers, streams, ponds, or rain barrels, none of which are certified by your modern kidney standards. You begin to imagine medieval Yelp reviews. 1 star, star, star. River tasted like sadness and sheep. 2 star, star, star. Well was fine until Gregory built his pig pen uphill. And as if nature wanted comedic timing, a goose honks at you from the roadside like it owns the industry. Nearby, you notice a strange container made of leather, a water skin. Yes, in some places, people drank from animal skin containers, which might feel a bit too immersive for your modern comfort zone, but leather was durable and transportable. Drinking from a water skin might actually be the medieval version of carrying around a reusable eco-friendly bottle. Except instead of sleek, minimalist branding, you're basically sipping from a dehydrated cow purse. Then comes a quirky historical tidbit you did not expect. In certain medieval places, people believed that water was unhealthy to drink on its own, fearing it caused illness because they didn't understand bacteria yet. They thought it needed to be mixed with something, heated or flavored to balance the humors. If nothing else, medieval logic was remarkably creative. And yes, they believed health depended on the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Modern you is not emotionally ready for that wellness theory. You pause, gazing at the bucket of murky water, and consider whether thirst is simply optional. And right then, someone mentions something new: herbal infusions. People often placed herbs into hot water, creating what you might call medieval tea, except there's no Earl Grey branding or cozy ceramic mugs with whimsical quotes. Herbs like mint, wildflowers, and even certain leaves or roots were steeped for flavor and supposed medicinal value. Historians still argue whether these drinks were genuinely effective or mostly placebo-powered hydration, but either way, they were safer if boiled. You wrap your hands around a warm clay cup, inhaling steam that carries earthy, grassy undertones. It feels comforting, like campfire therapy. You sip carefully and feel warmth settle into your chest, grounding you in the moment. Something about this ritual feels almost timeless, as if humans have always needed a comforting drink to soothe tired minds. Still, even with all these beverage strategies, medieval dehydration risks were real, especially during hot summers, long labor days, or illness. There is no sports drink, no electrolyte powder, no hydration hacks from a fitness influencer. Just resourcefulness, trial, and survival. You realize that your relationship with water, something you never questioned, is a perfect symbol for broader medieval life. Nothing is guaranteed, everything is earned, and comfort is not assumed. You think back to modern life, where people debate bottled water brands, designer hydration systems, and whether sparkling water counts as real water. Here, nobody has time for that. They're too busy avoiding dysentery. You take another sip of ale and accept that for now, it is your safest companion. It may not taste like home, but it does taste like staying alive, and that's a surprisingly comforting flavor. You've managed to hydrate, sort of, and now your attention shifts to something that feels strangely urgent: your clothes. Because as the hours pass, you start noticing that every movement feels just a little too scratchy, a little too stiff, and a little too much like you've been wrapped in a middle school craft project made from repurposed hay. The modern comfort of stretchy waistbands, breathable synthetic fabrics, and soft spun cotton simply doesn't exist here. In the medieval world, fashion isn't about style or self-expression nearly as much as function, status, and weather survival. And spoiler, weather is whimming. You glance down at your clothing, now unfamiliar, heavy and layered like you're preparing for a photo shoot titled "Ye Olde Potato Sack Couture." Your garments are made primarily from wool and linen, the two iconic medieval fabrics. Linen comes from flax, often used for undergarments because it's softer than wool, and washing wool is like convincing a cat to enjoy bath time. Wool, on the other hand, is everywhere. It keeps you warm, resists dirt, and is durable enough to survive a lifestyle involving mud, rain, and the occasional surprise goat collision. At first, wool sounds nice, cozy, rustic, like the sweater aisle of a charming mountain gift shop. But medieval wool is not your soft merino luxury knit. It's a textured, slightly itchy, heavyweight fabric that demands respect and occasional emotional compromise. It clings when wet, traps heat when you're active, and let's just say expressive if you sweat in it, which you will constantly. Meanwhile, linen underlayers help absorb sweat and protect your skin from wool irritation, acting as the medieval version of base layers, though nobody here uses such trendy vocabulary. You stretch your arms and feel the fabric restrict your movement, reminding you that medieval tailoring does not prioritize athletic range, comfort, or a relaxed casual Friday vibe. Clothes are cut from rectangular pieces to avoid wasting precious fabric, meaning shapes are more like draped cubes than ergonomic human silhouettes. Your sleeves may hang long, your hem may be uneven, and your tunic may feel like it has an identity crisis between being a shirt and being a small tent. And if you're hoping for multiple outfits, maybe a daytime look, nighttime look, and a feelin' cute, might churn butter later look, prepare your heart for disappointment. Most medieval people owned only 1 or 2 sets of clothing, total. Washing them required serious labor, water, time, and soap made from lye and animal fat, which could double as a tool for exfoliating your soul. Because of that, most garments were worn repeatedly without daily washing, and linen undertunics served as absorbent shields so the outer clothing didn't have to be cleaned as often. Think of it as medieval laundry hack culture. You tug gently at your collar and realize something else. Fasteners are different. No zippers, no Velcro, no plastic snaps. Instead, garments are held together using ties, laces, brooches, or occasionally buttons, though buttons didn't become widespread until later periods. So if you're accustomed to dressing quickly, here it's more like being backstage at a theater production, where every costume change requires 2 assistants, emotional support, and about 8 minutes. Now, let's talk footwear, because your feet are currently auditioning for a starring role in The Tragedy of Stabby Pebbles. Medieval shoes are typically made of leather, thin-soled, soft, and without arch support. Imagine wearing slippers that are allergic to comfort outdoors across mud, stones, and uneven ground all day long. If you're unlucky, your shoes may not even be left-right shaped. They could be identical, meaning your feet get to choose their own random adventure. You'll wish for socks. And yes, socks exist, often made from wool, sometimes feeling like sandpaper with aspirations. If you ever mocked modern sneaker technology, apologize now. While you settle into your new medieval fashion identity, you notice something odd. Color matters. Bright dyes require expensive materials and skill, so bold hues like deep blues, rich reds, and vibrant purples signal wealth. Commoners wear earth tones, browns, grays, muted greens, not because it's minimalist chic, but because nature doesn't offer bargain bin neon. If your clothing is bright and fine, people assume you're wealthy, noble, or possibly cosplaying a social class you definitely can't afford. Dressing above your status could even cause suspicion or punishment, because medieval society prefers clearly labeled life lanes. Fur, which was highly valued for warmth in cold seasons. Even inside, buildings lack insulation, and drafts are basically permanent roommates. Fur lining, if available, is used not for vanity, but survival. Meanwhile, leather jerkins and cloaks help block rain and wind, turning you into what feels like a character in a fantasy novel, but without the magical healing potions, sword skills, or convenient background music. At one point, a villager offers you a hood, which is more like a scarf-cloak hybrid with personality. It drapes over your head and shoulders, protecting from sun, rain, and gossip breezes. Hats, caps, and veils are common not just for modesty, but practicality. And head coverings aren't optional. They're cultural norm, health strategy, and social expectation rolled into one. If your head is uncovered, people don't think you're relaxed, they think you're strange, indecent, or trying to summon trouble. While awkwardly adjusting your clothes, you catch an unexpected whiff from your sleeve and realize something important. You already miss laundry detergent. Medieval soap, when available, uses lye made from ashes and animal fat, creating a harsh mixture that can turn fabric washing into a negotiation between stain removal and fabric survival. Linen can withstand boiling, wool cannot. So if your outerwear starts to smell like a combination of smoke, sweat, and medieval ambition, just know that's the default fragrance line here. For a quirky twist, here's a fringe tidbit. Some medieval people believed that wearing certain herbs or charms sewn into clothing could ward off illness or bad spirits. You might find pouches filled with lavender, rosemary, or even cryptic tokens hidden inside garments. Historians still argue whether these were believed more for spiritual protection or practical odor control, and honestly, both explanations feel valid. Aerotherapy meets early biohazard prevention. You shift your weight again, tug at your tunic, and accept the truth. Comfort isn't a priority here. Clothing is durable, modest, layered, weather shielding, and lifespan optimized. It's built for a world where fashion has to survive mud, work, smoke, rain, labor, and occasionally wild animals with disrespectful attitudes. And just like that, you realize something deeper, something that threads through every aspect of medieval living. Nothing is designed for comfort. Everything is designed for endurance. Night has finally come, and after an exhausting day of medieval reality, your body aches with a kind of fatigue you have never experienced before. The sun has slipped behind the horizon, leaving only the soft flicker of torches and the faint glow of a small fire still smoldering in the hearth. You are ready, desperate even, to rest, imagining that at least nightfall might offer relief. But in the medieval world, nighttime comfort is not a guarantee. It is simply another challenge to be endured. You are escorted to the sleeping quarters of the household, and instantly you notice that the air is much colder than expected. There is no thermostat, no sealed windows, no insulation, and no quiet hum of modern heating. The walls allow drafts to drift inside freely, and each breath you exhale becomes visible in the dim candlelight. The floorboards beneath your feet creak, and a musty odor hangs in the air, a blend of smoke, wool, body odor, and old wood. Nothing you can air out or spray away. Your mind instinctively searches for the warm, soft, supportive mattress you know from modern life, a bed that remembers your shape, provides gentle comfort, and smells fresh from laundry. But what you are offered instead is a rough, uneven straw mattress stuffed loosely into a coarse sack of linen that feels scratchy even through your clothes. The straw inside shifts with every touch, crunching underneath your weight, carrying the faint scent of dried fields and perhaps something slightly moldy. You notice small specks of plant fibers and dust lifting into the air each time you move it. You wonder if sleeping on the floor might actually be an improvement. But here, this is the best option. And this is not a bed meant for one person, not in this century. Privacy, that quiet personal bubble you are so accustomed to, simply does not exist here. The family sleeps together, not as a charming bonding moment, but out of necessity. Body heat is one of the few reliable defenses against the cold. Beds are shared among multiple people, and strangers are not always excluded if they are part of the household or passing helpers. The idea of having your own room, your own space, or even your own pillow would be considered a luxury reserved only for nobles, wealthy merchants, and royalty, people who rarely perform the type of physical labor you have endured today.
You are invited to lie down, still wearing most of your clothes, because there are no fluffy pajamas, no washed blankets, and no worry-free comfort. Removing too many layers risks shivering through the night, so people sleep in whatever keeps them warm. There is a single wool blanket, thick but scratchy, and smelling faintly of sheep and smoke from nights drying near the hearth. You drape it over yourself and try to settle in.
As your body sinks onto the straw mattress, you feel uneven lumps, sharp ends of stalks poking slightly into your back, and an intense awareness of every position your body takes. You shift, then shift again, trying to distribute the straw more evenly, but it stubbornly refuses to flatten out. You now understand why medieval people woke up stiff and sore, even if they stayed in bed for long hours. Slowly, your ears begin to adjust to the nighttime ambience. It is not the quiet peace you imagined. You hear breathing, many different rhythms, some calm, some heavy, some wheezy, some punctuated by snores. The wooden house settles and creaks as temperatures drop. Outside, dogs bark intermittently, responding to distant sounds you cannot identify. The wind whistles through small gaps in the walls, and the occasional rustling from within the room hints that perhaps you are not the only living creature settling into this straw.
Medieval homes often hosted more than humans. Mice and insects were very common roommates. They were drawn to warmth, crumbs, and nesting materials, and no matter how careful people were, these tiny visitors were simply part of the environment. You feel an unfamiliar tickle on your ankle under the blanket, and while you hope it is only a loose piece of wool, your imagination creates possibilities that make it much harder to relax.
You think of mattresses back home, foam layers, padded toppers, ergonomic pillows, and freshly laundered sheets. Here, pillows are also stuffed with straw or feathers, and they offer little support. As you rest your head, you find that it crunches, just like the mattress, shifting awkwardly rather than cradling your neck. Beyond physical discomfort, there is the psychological weight of sleeping in a medieval world where nighttime darkness is absolute. With no electric lamps, not even a faint light from passing cars, darkness here is thick, heavy, and unbroken. The candle that sits near the room flickers for a while longer, but eventually it must be blown out to conserve precious wax. Once that happens, the world becomes pitch black. You cannot see your own hand, nor the outlines of the room. You are left with only sound and imagination is powerful. Stories of spirits, creatures, demons, and night wanderers are deeply rooted in medieval belief. People do not fully understand illness, dreams, or natural night noises, and the unknown easily transforms into superstition. Even adults sleep with a cautious mind, whispering protective prayers or charms before drifting to sleep. The belief that night holds danger is very real, and without modern understanding, you find yourself fighting your own thoughts as the darkness closes around you. You curl slightly closer to the warmth beside you, unsure whether to feel comforted or confined. The floorboards remain cold beneath the spaces of the mattress that do not cushion properly, and the blanket cannot fully block every draft. It is astonishing how long seconds feel when comfort is missing and silence is never truly silent. After a long stretch of adjusting, shivering, shifting, and trying to regulate your breathing, your body slowly begins to surrender to its exhaustion. The fatigue from the endless workday finally presses against your consciousness like a heavy blanket, far more effective than wool. The discomfort does not disappear. It simply becomes something your mind grows too tired to resist. For a moment, just before sleep finally reaches you, you realize something important. Medieval people did not necessarily expect comfort from sleep the way modern humans do. Their entire lives were built on endurance, necessity, and practicality. A bed was not a sanctuary. It was simply a place to rest enough to work again tomorrow. And as your thoughts soften, sinking deeper into that rough, uneven straw, you begin to understand that here, in this world, survival is not about thriving, but about adapting. Slowly, gently, and finally, sleep begins to pull you away. Not wrapped in plush blankets, not surrounded by convenience, but carried by sheer human exhaustion, as the medieval night closes quietly around you. Morning does not arrive gently in the medieval world. There is no soft alarm tone, no warm bedroom light, no slow waking routine where you stretch under clean sheets and scroll through your phone before rising. Instead, dawn makes itself known through cold air brushing against your face, the muted light of a pale sky sliding through wooden slats, and the sound of footsteps and movement beginning before your body feels ready. The night may not have brought comfort, but sunrise demands responsibility. There is no such thing as sleeping in. There is no weekend. There are no vacation days waiting on a calendar. A new day simply means more work, because work is how you remain fed, sheltered, and accepted. As you rise from the rough straw bedding, your body reminds you of every uncomfortable angle you slept in. Your shoulders feel tight, your neck aches from the uneven pillow, and your hands still carry the tension from yesterday's unfamiliar labor. But there is no time to dwell on soreness. In this world, the measure of your worth is not creativity, ambition, or potential. It is productivity and the willingness to keep moving. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is not a moment of leisure or culinary joy. There is no brewed coffee aroma, no sizzling eggs, and no morning pastries waiting on a plate. Instead, there is a simple piece of bread, perhaps slightly stale but still edible, and watered-down ale or thin broth to provide energy for the work ahead. Medieval people eat not for pleasure but for survival, and meals are timed around function rather than comfort. Your tasks for the day are not printed on a planner. They are deeply woven into the rhythm of village life. Everyone contributes, including children, elders, and visitors who appear capable of lifting, building, stirring, mending, or carrying. Labor follows the seasons, and the seasons dictate everything. You begin outdoors, where the morning air is sharper than you expected, filling your lungs with cold moisture that smells of damp soil, wood smoke, and animals just beginning to stir. There is always something demanding attention: firewood to chop, water to fetch, animals to tend, tools to repair, surfaces to sweep, fields to check, and clothing to mend. Each job is necessary, and none of them can be postponed with a convenient mental note or digital reminder. As you observe the villagers, you notice that everyone moves with practiced efficiency. Tasks that would overwhelm a modern adult are performed here by teenagers, elders, or mothers carrying infants wrapped close to their chests. The pace is steady, not rushed, but relentless, because time wasted means hunger later. Fetching water alone becomes an entire routine. There is no faucet to turn, no filtered dispenser to fill. You travel to a nearby well or stream, carrying heavy wooden or clay containers that add weight before they even hold a drop. The ground is uneven, muddy in places, and slick with morning frost in others. It takes effort, real physical effort, to bring back enough water for washing, cooking, or drinking. You realize why water is used sparingly and why every drop matters. Then there is fire, your only form of heat and your only method of cooking. Keeping it going is a chore that requires vigilance.
You help gather kindling, split logs with unfamiliar tools, and coax flame from embers with breath and careful movements. There are no matches, no lighters, no electric stoves. Fire is a living element that must be fed, watched, and protected. Hours pass without you noticing any sense of personal progress. Tasks do not end, they loop. Once something is complete, its next cycle has already begun. Laundry made dirty yesterday must be washed by hand today. Needed clothes must be dried near the fire. Food storage must be maintained. Livestock must be fed again. And tools must be cared for so they do not fail tomorrow. Even the act of preparing one simple meal takes longer than an entire modern cooking session. Grains must be ground, vegetables must be cleaned and chopped, pots must be managed over an open flame, and flavors come not from convenience, but from whatever herbs the household grows or trades. There are no refrigerators, no spices from distant lands unless traded at a high cost, and no time for culinary artistry. If you pause, you quickly sense that you are behind schedule. There is always more to do. Leather to sew, fences to mend, roofs to patch, clay to shape, herbs to dry, candles to dip, or animals to chase away from crops. Even children are given responsibilities, scaring birds from fields, gathering berries, collecting eggs, or turning butter by hand. And through it all, you notice something profound. Work is not a category of life here, it is life. There is no separation between work mode and personal time. Every action contributes to survival. Productivity is not an achievement, it is an expectation. No one congratulates you for finishing a task. Completion simply means it is now time for the next. By midday, your hands are sore, your legs are tired, and your back feels older than it truly is. But the villagers around you continue moving with steady calmness, not complaining, not counting hours, not dreaming of free weekends. Their world has taught them endurance rather than escape. Weather provides no exception. Rain, heat, snow, wind, each season demands different forms of labor. Winter requires heavy gathering and preparation months in advance. Summer demands tending to crops and animals from sunrise to sunset. Nature offers no negotiation, and you cannot simply choose comfort over duty. At some point in the afternoon, as you pause to stretch your aching muscles, you glance toward the horizon. The light is fading slowly, but that does not signal rest. There are evening tasks still ahead, meals to finalize, tools to store, floors to sweep clean of crumbs that might attract pests, and fires to secure for the night. Even the act of winding down is composed of steps, not relaxation. And yet, despite the harshness, there is a strange calm in the rhythm. The mind has no space for overthinking. Worry is simplified. Tasks create structure. Purpose is constant. Here, no one searches for meaning, because survival is meaning. As night approaches, the villagers gather for the evening meal, quiet and tired, but connected through shared labor. There is no corporate burnout, but there is physical exhaustion. There is no modern stress, but there is the ever-present reliance on nature and each other. At last, when the final tasks are done and the fire settles into glowing embers, you realize why sleep comes quickly here. Not because beds are comfortable, but because bodies simply cannot resist rest. Work in the medieval world does not end with accomplishment. It ends only when the body gives out, and dawn promises it will all begin again. You might imagine that after your long day of exhausting chores, the medieval world would grant you at least one reliable comfort: competent medical care. Something reassuring, like a friendly doctor's office, a clean examination room, maybe a quiet waiting area with outdated magazines and a poster reminding you to drink water. Instead, what you have access to feels more like a curious blend between a gardener, a fortune teller, and someone whose medical textbook was copied from memory during a lightning storm and then smeared with muddy fingerprints. The idea of healthcare here is not what you know.
It is a combination of herbal remedies, religious assumptions, folk traditions, blood removal strategies, and the occasional helpful accident.
Even before illness, you notice how vulnerable your body feels in this world. You've spent days eating limited foods, sleeping poorly, working constantly, and avoiding water that may or may not give you a short but intense life crisis. With no pasteurized milk, no hand sanitizer, and no knowledge of microscopic organisms, your immune system feels like it's playing medieval roulette. You get a small splinter from rough wooden tools, no big deal, right? But here, even a tiny wound might introduce bacteria that nobody knows exists. A minor cut could escalate into an infection, and unfortunately, the phrase, "just put on a Band-Aid and watch a cartoon," has not been invented yet. When you mention that you feel a little headache and your throat feels scratchy, the woman next to you slowly nods and says something like, "It may be the wind spirits." You internally raise one eyebrow, but everyone else nods as if she just delivered the most logical diagnosis of the year. You suddenly miss that moment in modern life when someone tells you to drink water and rest, which now sounds like advanced medical science. Eventually, someone suggests you visit the local healer, a respected figure whose practice blends herbal knowledge, trial and error memory, deep intuition, and a confidence level that feels both impressive and mildly concerning. When you arrive, there is no formal appointment time. People simply wait in line or stand around until the healer acknowledges them, like an ancient version of a slow-loading web page. The healer's workspace does not resemble a clinic. It feels more like a kitchen, garden shed, and spiritual altar merged into one. Dried herbs hang overhead, bowls of mysterious powders sit on wooden shelves, and the smell of smoke, earth, and bitter plants fills the air. This healer knows many things passed down through generations. You might find mint or chamomile for digestive issues, honey for wound care, willow bark for pain, or yarrow leaves to stop bleeding. In fact, the fun historical detail is that willow bark contains a chemical similar to what would eventually become aspirin. So yes, there is science hiding beneath the surface, just not labeled, packaged, or explained by anyone wearing a white coat. The healer also knows quirky remedies, like using moss as wound dressing or hanging amulets to ward away night air sickness. And she might tell you to sleep with a sprig of rosemary under your pillow to sharpen your memory. Oddly enough, you consider trying it, partly because it sounds comforting, and partly because your options are limited. But remember, not all medical care is herbal, gentle, or soothing, because medieval medicine also includes bloodletting, an age-old practice based on the theory of balancing bodily fluids known as humors. These humors were believed to control health through equilibrium, and if someone looked too pale, too flushed, too tired, too energetic, or simply too something, the solution might be to remove blood, apply leeches, or induce vomiting. Even though you quietly think, "Oh, absolutely not," you also notice that refusing medical treatment might cause confusion or suspicion. After all, this was science to them, even if historians still argue whether humoral theory helped anyone or simply made patients tired and dizzy. Meanwhile, you also hear whispers about barber surgeons, who are real professionals, but not in the way you imagine. They cut hair, yes, but they also pull teeth, treat broken bones, and perform minor surgeries when necessary. Seeing someone sharpen a blade as casually as a chef prepares carrots does not reassure you. You consider the possibility that a medieval haircut might come with an unexpected dental extraction, depending on who walks in next. And of course, religion shapes medical behavior here too. If your illness appears mysterious, persistent, or frightening, some people interpret it as spiritual imbalance or divine messaging rather than a biological matter. Prayers, holy water, fasting, and pilgrimages are common strategies. Saints are chosen like specialists, one for sore throats, another for eyes, another for childbirth. Treatment plans sometimes include instructions that read like, "Walk 50 miles and sleep next to a holy relic," which makes your modern prescription bottle sound like a miracle.
Even childbirth feels like an unpredictable lottery. Midwives are skilled, intuitive, and respected, yet they work with no antiseptic, no epidural, and no emergency operating room. Every birth requires strength and hope, and the entire community understands that life and death remain close neighbors. Despite all this, the healer who examines you is calm, caring, and confident. She checks your pulse with gentle fingers, studies your tongue, examines your eyes, and listens to your symptoms. She mixes herbs into warm liquid, adds drops of pungent oil, and hands you a cup with the reassuring tone of someone who has treated hundreds of people before. You sip it slowly. It tastes like lawn clippings that were stored inside a boot, but you swallow anyway. A little warmth radiates through your body, and strangely, your headache begins to soften. Is it medicine or placebo? Hard to tell, but comfort matters.
As you leave, you glance around at the other waiting villagers, a child with a persistent cough, an old man with a swollen knee, a woman holding her arm stiffly after a fall, and a teenager with a broken tooth cradled in her palm. You understand that sickness is not just uncomfortable here, it is dangerous, time-consuming, and sometimes defining. You also realize that modern access to antibiotics, clean water, sterile equipment, and emergency care would feel like divine magic to these people. Later that night, lying on the itchy straw again, you think about how fragile human life feels in this world. Illness is not a temporary inconvenience. It is a real threat, even when caused by something you might ignore today. You close your eyes, breathe slowly, and, perhaps for the first time in a long time, feel grateful for every small medical comfort you've ever taken for granted. Still, medieval life continues around you. Work will return tomorrow, and danger will always whisper softly from the shadows. You wake the next morning with a faint sense of hope, thinking that maybe today will feel a little easier, a little cleaner, a little less demanding on your senses. Unfortunately, the medieval world has different plans. As soon as you begin moving, you are reminded that smell isn't just something you notice here, it's something you live with. It exists like weather, ever present, shaping your mood even when you try to ignore it. You can't escape it. And oddly, the villagers seem perfectly accustomed to existing inside a constant cloud of layered odors that your modern self can barely comprehend. You step outside, and the air greets you like a dense collage. Wood smoke, unwashed clothes, animal manure, damp earth, boiled cabbage, human sweat at varying levels of intensity, and something sour that you cannot locate or identify. You try not to breathe too deeply, but you quickly realize that shallow breathing only makes your lungs feel unsatisfied, leaving you stuck between survival instinct and respiratory avoidance. Meanwhile, the villagers inhale comfortably, as if this is the smell of home, maybe even nostalgia if they moved away and returned. Kind of like how you think popcorn smells cozy, except this is not popcorn. Your instinct tells you that the solution to bad smells is washing, so naturally you assume that baths must exist somewhere. And yes, they do, but not in the way your modern mind expects. Bathing is not a daily activity or a scheduled part of personal hygiene. Medieval people often believed that warm, open pores made the body vulnerable to illness, so ironically, cleaning too much could be considered risky. Historians still argue whether common folk bathed only a few times per year or far more often, depending on region, culture, and household wealth. But either way, daily showers with scented steam and fancy shampoo commercials are nowhere close to reality. Instead, you learn that most people freshen up using a mix of seasonal water access, linen cloth rubbing, short rinses, or herbs that help mask rather than remove odor. Lavender, rosemary, mint, or even simple dried grass might be tucked into clothes like wearable air fresheners. You smile a little at the thought, half impressed and half amused, wondering if medieval villagers accidentally invented the first fragrance sachet simply out of self-defense. But even before considering washing, you must explore the medieval version of a bathroom. There are no white porcelain toilets, no smooth sinks, no privacy stalls with pleasant lighting, and no toilet paper wrapped in cloud-themed branding. Instead, you encounter one of several possible arrangements, depending on where you are living. A wooden bench with a hole leading to an open pit, a simple chamber pot tucked under a bed, or, if you are unlucky, an outdoor corner marked by collective agreement and frequent regret. In many households, especially among common workers, chamber pots rule the night. They are ceramic or wooden bowls used for anything you'd rather not perform in the cold, dark outdoors. In the morning, someone must carry the pot to a designated dumping area, which could range from a nearby ditch to a communal cesspit. You try not to picture the moment when someone accidentally spills one. And if you thought you could solve the odor problem by throwing the contents far away, don't worry, the medieval street design will return the favor. Waste disposal here relies on gravity, time, and luck, not plumbing systems or sanitation engineering. And if you are in a large town or early city, the bathroom situation evolves into something both fascinating and horrifying. Waste might be tossed directly into the street with a vocal warning, creating rivers of questionable liquid flowing along the edges of busy walkways. You quickly learn to walk with vigilance, stepping carefully, almost artistically, while thinking that modern sidewalk gum suddenly seems adorable. Now, about bathing. You eventually discover that there are public bathhouses in some places, especially in more prosperous towns. These establishments allow people to soak, wash, and relax, sometimes even combining socializing, business discussions, and casual community gossip. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine a medieval version of a spa day, until you remember that water is rarely changed, heating it takes enormous effort, and bathhouses sometimes carry reputations that your bedtime-friendly narrator will politely gloss over with a sleepy smile. Let's just say that bathhouses served multiple purposes, and not all of them were related to hygiene. Still, some bathhouse water contains herbs, oils, or pleasant scents that help mask odors and soothe sore joints. You might even find steam that reminds you of a sauna, though the walls, lighting, and temperature control are far less luxurious. The idea of bathing together with strangers feels awkward at first, but over time, the warmth becomes irresistible, especially after days of grime, sweat, and the constant earthy perfume of village life. Back at your sleeping quarters, washing your hands becomes its own ritual. There is no liquid soap, no antibacterial foam, no fresh-scented lavender bottle with a pump. Instead, you use water from a shared basin or bucket, which everyone dips into using the same container. Hygiene here feels like a group project with unclear instructions. Sometimes herbs are added for fragrance, sometimes sand or ash is used as a scrubbing agent, and sometimes people simply wipe their hands on cloth or clothing and move on. And yet, many medieval people still recognized that hand washing mattered after certain tasks, an important detail that gets overlooked in modern jokes about hygiene. It may not be perfect, but the concept of cleanliness is not absent, it is simply shaped by different limitations. As for clothing, washing it is an exhausting event. Laundry is not a pleasant day of scented detergents and soft blankets. It is labor-intensive, involving boiling water, physical scrubbing, manual wringing, and long drying times. Because of this, clothes are worn repeatedly until visibly dirty or noticeably smelly. And when the weather turns, drying becomes even harder. You understand now why many medieval people owned only a few garments and treated them as valuable resources, not disposable fashion. Even walking near animals, sheep, pigs, chickens, cows, horses, adds another layer to village aroma culture. Stables are close to homes for practicality and warmth, and manure is normal, expected, and used as fertilizer. If modern life introduced scratch and sniff stickers to medieval villagers, they would probably shrug and say, "Ah yes, Tuesday." Over time, your senses adjust, not completely, but enough that your brain stops screaming emergency every few minutes.
The smell of wood smoke begins to feel grounding. The herbal pouches tucked into clothes feel clever. The shared scents in communal spaces feel like part of the environment, not a problem waiting for a health inspector.
And slowly, you realize that smell here is not a flaw. It is a signal, a record, a natural byproduct of living so closely connected to the earth, animals, fire, and community. In the modern world, life smells like manufactured cleanliness. Here, it smells like life itself. You fall asleep that night with rosemary tucked near your pillow, not because it solves everything, but because it offers the closest thing to comfort in a world where clean air is earned, not delivered. You wake the next morning thinking that perhaps the most frightening part of medieval life might be illness, constant labor, or uncomfortable sleeping arrangements. But as you stretch your sore muscles and head outside, you begin to realize that there is something else, something deeper, more unpredictable, and far more unsettling than physical hardship. It is the justice system. Not the clean, organized, painstakingly documented system you know, where lawyers debate with carefully chosen words and judges reference thick books written by committees. Here, justice feels like a blend of tradition, guesswork, intimidation, superstition, and community opinion, sprinkled with a level of unpredictability that makes you want to keep your head down and your mouth even quieter. You may assume that as long as you follow the rules, you're safe. But what rules exactly? This world doesn't have an easy-to-read handbook or a friendly website summarizing your rights. Laws change from one region to another, vary by lordship, depend heavily on social class, and can shift based on who tells the story first. The result is a kind of legal atmosphere where reputation matters more than evidence, and truth sometimes depends on how many people believe it. It starts subtly. You observe a villager being accused of stealing grain, not because anyone saw it, but because someone thinks they might have seen the corner of a cloak near a storage bin the night before. A quiet whisper becomes a rumor becomes a conversation, and suddenly the entire community seems invested in discovering the truth based on creative reasoning rather than direct proof. Historians still argue whether medieval communities leaned more toward mercy or punishment, depending on region and century. But either way, you quickly understand that just being different or unfortunate could draw unwanted attention. When a dispute arises, the layers of justice reveal themselves. For small matters, local lords, village elders, or reeves might listen to both sides and make a decision that sounds like a mix of moral lecture, personal memory, and whatever punishment feels appropriate that morning. There are fines for many offenses, though payment is not always money. Sometimes it is crops, labor, tools, or livestock. Fines are inconvenient but survivable as long as you have resources. But if you don't, well, prepare yourself for humiliation-based justice. Public shaming is extremely popular. Stocks, the wooden contraptions that hold your head and hands, are common, and standing locked in them for hours invites both discomfort and boredom. People may laugh, mock, or toss unpleasant things toward you. For less severe humiliation, you might be forced to wear a symbolic object indicating your offense, such as a sign or an exaggerated item, something that communicates this person messed up in a way that prevents subtlety. It's medieval social media, except you can't log off and there are no privacy settings. And that is only the beginning. For more serious accusations, medieval justice takes a dramatic pivot into a world of tests, trials, and symbolic rituals. You hear villagers mention the concept of a trial by ordeal, and your modern brain immediately thinks this sounds like terrible branding. But here, it's quite literal. The logic behind an ordeal is that divine judgment will reveal innocence or guilt. You might touch hot iron, plunge your hand into boiling water, or be submerged in cold water. The belief is that God will protect the innocent and reveal the guilty through injury or survival. You quietly decide that if you ever need legal advice here, you will politely decline the ordeal package. There is also trial by combat, though more associated with certain periods and classes. It doesn't always mean sword fighting in an arena the way movies show it, but yes, it involves physical confrontation where the victor is assumed to hold divine truth. Imagine if modern court cases were decided by whoever won an intense arm wrestling match. That's the medieval vibe. Then comes the role of confessions. Confessions are highly valued because they create clarity, but the path to obtaining one isn't always gentle. Pressure, persuasion, social fear, or religious guilt can make people confess things simply to end emotional suffering. In other cases, physical intimidation or fear of escalating punishment could also influence outcomes. You become very aware that silence is a survival skill. Keeping opinions private becomes as crucial as keeping your hands clean. Well, clean-ish. You notice how villagers speak in careful tones, especially around authority figures like landowners, priests, or headmen. Words weighed lightly in the modern world, complaints, sarcasm, or casual accusations carry the weight of real consequences here. Still, not every corner of the medieval justice system feels dark or hopeless. Some methods are surprisingly thoughtful. For example, compensation and reconciliation often matter more than vengeance. Instead of focusing on sending someone away forever, communities might try to restore balance so that everyday life can continue smoothly. Many disputes are solved through negotiation rather than violence, showing a surprisingly practical mindset. Because in a small village, removing someone from society creates a labor gap, and harmony is a shared priority. Even so, gender, class, and reputation factor heavily into outcomes. If you are a traveler, outsider, or simply appear unfamiliar, your credibility instantly sits at a disadvantage. If you are poor, discipline lands harder. If you are wealthy or connected, sometimes punishment becomes a friendly warning instead of public embarrassment. It is not equal, not neutral, and definitely not predictable. You witness a case where a woman is accused of brewing spoiled ale and bringing ill luck to the community. A group gathers, some convinced, others whispering doubt, but the conversation soon shifts from what happened to what might happen. If no action is taken, in this world, fear of potential danger can become evidence itself. The punishment ends up being a fine and temporary ban from selling ale, a relatively light outcome, and you feel strangely relieved, even though you had no personal involvement. You realize you are emotionally invested in a justice system that does not belong to you, which is either fascinating or slightly concerning. At the same time, you hear murmurs about superstitions that occasionally become legal concerns. Someone might be blamed for illness in livestock or sudden misfortune in crops simply because they acted strangely, looked different, or spoke out of turn. There is no forensic evidence, no scientific lab report. Instead, patterns are imagined, theories whispered, and conclusions drawn from emotional instinct. The concept of a fair trial feels like a luxury rather than a guaranteed right. Yet, the community depends on order, even if the methods feel unusual. Without a structured police force, neighbors become witnesses, guards, and enforcers. Honor, reputation, and collective safety hold society together. And though it feels strange to you, most villagers accept it without question, because it is the world they know and trust. They do not crave modern justice. They crave stability, familiarity, and survival. As night falls, you sit quietly, realizing that danger in medieval times isn't always lurking in the woods, in the battlefield, or in the foul-smelling water. Sometimes, danger whispers in assumptions, spreads through gossip, and manifests in the fragile lines between truth and belief. You pull your blanket closer, determined to be polite, neutral, humble, and hopefully invisible, just in case. The next aspect of medieval life that truly tests your endurance is food, specifically what you eat, how you eat it, and how surprisingly limited your choices really are. You might think that after surviving endless work, sleeping on straw, and navigating questionable hygiene, at least your meals would be a comforting constant. But here, food is less about pleasure and more about practicality, survival, and social signaling. In fact, your modern ideas of breakfast, lunch, and dinner feel almost luxurious compared to what most medieval people experienced. Your morning begins, if you are lucky, with a piece of coarse bread and a mug of weak ale or thin gruel. Ale for breakfast might seem strange now, but remember, water is often unsafe to drink, and fermented beverages kill off harmful bacteria. In other words, that slightly sour, low-alcohol ale is basically medieval safety water. And yes, it tastes exactly like what you imagine. Historians still argue whether early medieval people consumed alcohol for taste or simply because it was less dangerous than water. For you, the line between gross and safe blurs quickly. You try to chew your bread slowly, appreciating the effort that went into it. Grain was labor-intensive to grow, harvest, and mill, often done with simple stone tools. Milling creates flour with a rough texture, which you immediately feel against your gums. It's nothing like the soft, pre-packaged loaves you're used to. And if you are hoping for butter, jam, or cheese, remember that these items are luxuries, typically reserved for wealthier households. Most common folk eat bread with the occasional vegetable, some herbs, or watery broth. The taste is simple, functional, and filling, but certainly not indulgent. By mid-morning, your stomach begins to remind you that food is sparse and irregular. Unlike today, snacking on granola bars, chips, or a fruit smoothie is impossible. Hunger is managed strategically. People eat when food is available, not necessarily when the body signals. This approach seems harsh to your modern mind, but it reflects the real rhythms of labor, season, and resource scarcity. Hunger here is normal, expected, and largely tolerated. Your body struggles to adjust, and you find yourself feeling perpetually almost hungry in a way that you can't quite fix with a single snack. Lunch, if it exists, is another practical meal. Perhaps a bowl of pottage, thick, mushy stew made from vegetables, legumes, grains, and sometimes small amounts of meat. Meat itself is expensive, even in rural villages. Chickens or pigs might be consumed sparingly, and beef is often reserved for special occasions. Fish might appear if the community is near a river or pond. Every bite is utilitarian. It fills the stomach, provides calories for labor, and preserves precious resources. Taste is secondary. You observe some villagers seasoning their meals with herbs like parsley, sage, or mustard. Salt is used too, but sparingly, because preserving food with salt is a delicate balance between cost and necessity. Exotic spices like cinnamon or pepper exist, yes, but only in wealthy households or traded in town markets. The difference between modern kitchens stocked with spices from around the world and a medieval pantry is profound. In this world, flavor is secondary, sustenance is paramount. The act of eating itself also feels different. There are no forks as we know them today. Usually, food is eaten with knives, spoons, or simply fingers, depending on the dish. Plates may be wooden, bowls may be ceramic or metal, and napkins are rare. Sharing food is common, which is practical, communal, and occasionally challenging if your stomach is easily unsettled by others' proximity. You find yourself mindful of table manners, not because of etiquette classes, but because survival depends on avoiding offense or social friction. Meals are timed according to the rhythm of labor, not social convenience. People eat early, quickly, and then return to work. Cooking takes time and energy, and food cannot be left out too long because of pests, spoilage, or contamination. This is not a world of casual snacking or comfort food indulgence. It's a world where calories are functional and the concept of extra food is almost non-existent. You also notice that seasonal changes dramatically influence diet. In winter, vegetables are scarce. Grains may be stored for long months, and preserved foods like salted meat or dried legumes dominate meals. In summer, fresh produce floods the table, but spoilage is always a concern. People carefully plan, conserve, and ration. The idea of being able to open a supermarket at any hour is literally unimaginable. You consider just how much time, effort, and planning your modern meals take for granted. For a quirky medieval twist, you'll learn that some communities incorporated unusual ingredients into their diet. Ingredients like peas, beans, or even insects were used occasionally. Some bread included bits of leftover grains, seeds, or even small roots. Historians still argue whether certain dishes were actually consumed frequently or exaggerated in records for curiosity and humor. But the possibility adds a layer of strangeness to your new reality. You can't help but smile at the mental image of someone accidentally eating a cricket or two in their gruel. Another aspect of medieval food is its role in social hierarchy. What you eat signals your place in society. Wealthier families might enjoy multiple courses, rich sauces, fine breads, or wine, while peasants survive on bread, pottage, and whatever vegetables the land provides. Overindulgence by lower classes could be frowned upon or even punished if it seems like transgressing social norms. Food is never just nourishment. It's also communication, status, and morality wrapped in one edible package. By evening, after another long day of labor, your final meal of the day is often rushed, warm but not hot, filling but not delightful. You eat, sip your weak ale or thin broth, and think about how modern meals can take hours of enjoyment, while this world treats them as a necessary pit stop on the way to rest and labor again. Finally, as you settle down near the fire, you realize that medieval eating is about endurance, creativity, and adaptation. Flavor is secondary, convenience is absent, and waste is unthinkable. Hunger, thirst, and effort shape every meal, teaching a lesson in resilience that you will not forget, even if you desperately wish you could never smell gruel again. By now, you might think you've developed some sense of rhythm in this medieval life. The exhausting work, the rough sleeping arrangements, the challenging food, and even the unpredictable medical care. And yet, as you step outside this morning, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer unpredictability of travel and transport. Moving from place to place, even within your own village or to a nearby town, is an exercise in patience, endurance, and occasional ingenuity, qualities you never realized you relied on until your modern conveniences vanished. There are no roads lined with asphalt, no traffic lights, no buses, no cars. Paths are often dirt tracks that become mud rivers when it rains. Cobblestones exist in wealthier towns, but even they are uneven, slippery, and occasionally treacherous when covered with animal waste. You quickly notice that footwear matters. Shoes, if you have them, are thick, heavy, and inflexible. Sandals leave your feet exposed to thorns, stones, and an occasional curious dog. Every step requires attention. Every journey requires foresight. If you must travel longer distances, the choices are limited and often arduous. Riding a horse is an option only if you are wealthy, fortunate, or employed in a position that grants access to one. Horses are expensive to keep and feed, and not every rider is skilled enough to navigate medieval paths safely. You imagine yourself on a horse, wobbling across uneven ground, and immediately decide walking might be safer, though slower and more exhausting. Carriages and carts exist, yes, but they are rare and primarily used for goods rather than passengers. The roads are rarely maintained, meaning a cart ride involves jolts, uneven terrain, and the occasional disaster if a wheel collapses into a rut. Mud, rocks, and drainage ditches conspire to slow progress, leaving you grateful for even your two tired legs. And there is no GPS, only your memory, local knowledge, and the occasional well-meaning villager pointing in the right direction, often with approximations like, "Go past the big oak, then follow the sound of the water."
You realize that navigation requires constant attention and an intimate understanding of the landscape, something most modern humans have outsourced to satellites. For water transport, if rivers or lakes are nearby, you might find small boats or rafts. They are functional but basic, often paddled with effort, rarely covered, and sometimes overcrowded with both goods and people. Safety is relative. Falling in might result in wet clothes, lost belongings, or a cold and potentially life-threatening encounter with currents, debris, or winter's chill. You notice that even seemingly simple travel carries risk, and risk is a constant companion in this world.
Trade routes, markets, and town visits add another layer of complexity. Goods and food are transported by wagon or boat, not trucks. Traders must plan days in advance, considering not only distance, but also weather, road conditions, and potential theft. Bandits are not uncommon, and travelers often rely on the protection of armed escorts, guilds, or sheer luck. You reflect that modern delivery systems, with their predictable timetables, climate-controlled transport, and insurance, are literally magical in comparison. Even short trips carry an energy cost. Fetching water from a distant well, delivering goods to a neighbor, or walking to the local blacksmith for repairs involves careful packing, endurance, and knowledge of terrain. You find yourself calculating calories, estimating fatigue, and learning how to pace yourself to avoid collapse. The medieval world is unforgiving to the inattentive traveler, and you quickly recognize that staying put in one place is sometimes safer than moving at all. Then there is the unpredictability of weather. A sudden storm, unmarked in any almanac or forecast, can make travel miserable or outright dangerous. Mud becomes sticky, rivers swell, and paths disappear under sheets of rain. You watch villagers adjust, tucking cloaks over their shoulders, balancing heavy loads, or improvising covers from spare cloth. The experience is exhausting, but oddly instructive. You notice how quickly humans adapt when they cannot rely on convenience or warning systems. For fun, there are occasional journeys to festivals, fairs, or religious gatherings. These are rare chances to leave your village, socialize, and see outsiders. Yet even these trips are calculated. Travel time, supplies, accommodations, and risk all play a role. You realize that going to what feels like a simple event today involved days of preparation back then, patience and endurance that your modern self would find exhausting.
Animals accompany you on most journeys. Horses, oxen, dogs, even cats play roles in movement and survival. Oxen pull carts slowly but powerfully, while dogs might guide, guard, or distract. And yet all of these companions are unpredictable. A spooked horse, an unruly ox, or an overly curious dog can disrupt travel, forcing you to improvise. The medieval world teaches you that movement is never taken for granted. It is earned through observation, patience, and careful attention.
Curious tidbits emerge as you travel. For example, some communities used waymarks carved into trees, stones, or posts to signal direction or distance. Others relied on sound, bells, horns, or the noise of flowing water to guide travelers in low visibility. Historians still argue how consistent these signals were and whether most villagers could rely on them without getting lost. But you notice that, in practice, local knowledge dominates. Outsiders would struggle, and even you, with your modern sensibilities, find yourself occasionally disoriented. By evening, after a long day of walking, hauling, navigating uneven terrain, and carefully avoiding mud or animal droppings, you arrive back at your village, muscles sore, mind alert, and feet aching. Travel, even for necessities, is exhausting, risky, and time-consuming. You realize that medieval life is full of movement, but every step is purposeful, calculated, and imbued with consequence. Every journey carries small hazards, teaches adaptability, and underscores just how much modern convenience shields you from constant physical challenge. As you collapse once again onto straw bedding, you appreciate the simplicity and danger of movement in this world. A short trip requires preparation, endurance, and vigilance. qualities modern humans often forget, but which medieval villagers embody naturally. You close your eyes, imagining the paths ahead, the steps behind, and the infinite effort that life itself demands. And yet, despite exhaustion, a sense of admiration grows quietly inside you. You have not just walked, you have survived, you have adapted. You have learned how fragile comfort can be, and how precious it is when it finally appears. As night falls again, you begin to notice something you hadn't fully appreciated before. The medieval night itself is a formidable presence. Darkness here is not simply the absence of light. It is an environment you cannot control, a force that shapes movement, perception, and behavior. You were used to streetlights, glowing screens, and the soft halo of bedside lamps. But in this world, night is a complete sensory shift. Cold, quiet, and occasionally alarming. Your eyes strain against the shadows, and even familiar paths feel foreign without the guiding illumination of fire or torch. Sleep patterns are dictated by the sun, or more precisely, by the natural light that rises and falls. Artificial light exists only in limited forms: candles, torches, or a small hearth fire. These are precious resources, expensive or time-consuming to produce, and used sparingly. You quickly learn to avoid wasting light on frivolous activities. Even reading or sewing requires deliberate effort, and many villagers reserve such tasks for communal gatherings where multiple people can share a single candle or fire. Historians still argue whether most peasants slept in one long stretch or in interrupted bouts to maximize warmth and productivity, but either way, sleep is shaped by environment, not convenience. The dangers of night extend beyond mere darkness. Animals roam freely. Wolves in rural areas, dogs and livestock closer to home, and occasionally creatures you cannot identify, rustling through brush or croplands. Their sounds echo eerily, especially when amplified by dense forest or empty fields. You cannot always distinguish the harmless from the threatening. The medieval mind interprets these noises carefully, sometimes as danger, sometimes as omens, and occasionally as everyday life. You realize quickly that constant vigilance is almost instinctual. Human threats persist as well. Traveling or working late in the dark exposes you to potential bandits, territorial disputes, or disagreements with neighbors. While most communities are relatively safe due to close social ties, misunderstandings can escalate quickly. Without lighting, doors, or locks comparable to modern standards, safety depends on community presence, trust, and sometimes sheer luck. The shadowy corners of homes and streets hold the power to intimidate even the strongest person. Nighttime hygiene is another challenge. You remember the chamber pots from earlier sections and now appreciate just how inconvenient and dangerous their use becomes after dusk. Trips outside are precarious, with uneven paths and unseen hazards underfoot. Simple tasks like fetching water or tending a fire take twice as long when visibility is limited, and missteps could result in injury. Even indoor activities require careful attention to avoid spilling candles, stepping on small tools, or waking others. Yet night is not entirely unpleasant. Fires create pockets of warmth and comfort, the soft crackling sound providing a subtle background lull. The smell of smoke mixes with herbs, roasting grain, or cooking meals, producing a sensory tapestry that is both grounding and familiar. Community gatherings around these fires involve storytelling, sharing news, or quiet reflection. Despite the ever-present awareness of danger, these moments carry a gentle rhythm that reassures and unites. Sleep itself is not guaranteed to be restful. Straw mattresses are uncomfortable, and cold nights penetrate clothing and bedding. You might find yourself waking frequently, adjusting blankets or checking doors, listening to sounds that modern life would mask entirely. Children and elders share the same spaces, so noise, shifting bodies, and occasional cries are part of the nocturnal environment. Nevertheless, after a day of hard labor and mental vigilance, even fragmented sleep is deeply restorative.
Quirky medieval adaptations emerge as you observe villagers coping with night. Some hang herbs over their beds to ward off insects, illness, or evil spirits. Others keep small fires or embers nearby to provide light and warmth. Some sleep in shifts to maintain security or care for animals. These practices reveal both practicality and superstition, blending rational survival with cultural beliefs. Historians still argue which methods were widespread and which were anecdotal, but in practice, they provide comfort and function. Finally, night in medieval life is a teacher. It enforces patience, awareness, and respect for natural rhythms. It demands careful planning, adaptability, and cooperation. And it reminds you, perhaps more than any other part of the day, that your modern assumptions about safety, comfort, and convenience are luxuries your medieval counterparts could scarcely imagine. As you finally settle onto straw bedding, the day's exhaustion weighing heavily, you feel a quiet gratitude for these lessons. Darkness is no longer just a lack of light. It is an immersive, living presence that shapes behavior, decisions, and even character. You drift into sleep with the understanding that survival is not about resisting the night, but learning to move within it, adapt to its rhythms, and respect its quiet power.
By now, you've endured labor, rough sleeping, challenging hygiene, limited food, difficult travel, and the unpredictability of night, and you might think you're starting to understand medieval life. But there is one final, almost invisible challenge that truly shapes daily existence: sanitation and the environment itself. You've encountered the smells, the chamber pots, and the street waste, but living here long enough reveals that medieval sanitation is not just unpleasant, it is a constant negotiation between survival, resourcefulness, and tolerance for discomfort. Water is the lifeblood of any household, but in medieval villages, it is a precious, precarious commodity. Wells are common, but their depth, cleanliness, and accessibility vary dramatically. You must carefully judge whether the water looks clear, smells acceptable, and is free from debris. Streams or rivers might provide easy access, but their purity is uncertain, and human or animal contamination is a constant risk. Drinking unboiled water is a gamble, and you quickly learn why thin ale or weak beer often replaces it in daily consumption. Historians still argue how much waterborne disease impacted average lifespan, but even without precise statistics, you can feel the fragility of human health around you. Waste disposal amplifies the challenges. Streets, lanes, and paths frequently double as conduits for household waste, animal droppings, and storm runoff. Rain or snow can turn these thoroughfares into mud-laden traps, complicating travel and introducing bacteria and parasites into daily life. You discover that walking requires constant attention, not only to avoid injury, but also to navigate hygiene hazards. Villagers develop a cautious rhythm, stepping carefully, carrying children with care, and always aware of what lies beneath their feet. The modern convenience of clean streets, hidden sewers, and sanitation workers suddenly feels like an unimaginable luxury. Your living space presents its own hurdles. Houses are constructed from timber, wattle and daub, or stone, often without chimneys. Smoke from cooking fires or heating fills rooms, mingling with the scent of unwashed textiles, livestock, and human activity. Ventilation is minimal, so odors linger, soot coats surfaces, and particulate matter floats in the air. Dust and debris accumulate quickly, and you understand why respiratory ailments are more common. Cleaning is a constant, physically demanding task, and even then, complete purity is impossible. Quirky solutions emerge out of necessity. You notice that people sprinkle ash, straw, or sand on floors to absorb moisture, neutralize odors, or reduce slipperiness. Herbs like lavender or thyme are tucked into clothing, hung in rooms, or burned to freshen the air. Public and private latrines often rely on stone, wood, or carefully placed pits to manage human waste. Some villages implement rudimentary drainage systems, and waste is often repurposed as fertilizer. It's messy, smelly, and far from perfect,
but there is ingenuity behind every adaptation.
Animals are a persistent presence indoors and outdoors. Chickens, pigs, goats, cats, and dogs share your environment more intimately than you might expect. Their waste, behavior, and needs impact every part of life. Food storage must account for pests, rodents, and opportunistic birds. Crops are protected from animals, and livestock must be fed, watered, and housed carefully. You realize that coexistence with animals is a constant negotiation. One misstep could lead to ruined food, disease, or injury. The concept of personal hygiene is equally different. Bathing is infrequent, and clean clothing is scarce. You observe the use of herbal washes, rubbing with cloths, and even cold water splashes for quick freshening. While these methods may seem inadequate compared to modern standards, they reflect an understanding of bodily care within environmental limitations. Folk wisdom combines with practical knowledge. A sprig of rosemary wards off pests, a vinegar wash reduces odor, and sunlight is harnessed to disinfect and dry garments. Historians still debate how effective these strategies were at preventing disease, but clearly they provided villagers with a workable sense of cleanliness.
Even urban environments bring unique challenges. Early towns are crowded, with houses built tightly together and streets narrow. Noise, smells, and debris create sensory overload, and fire hazards are ever present due to wooden construction and open flames. Regulations, if they exist, are inconsistently enforced, leaving residents to improvise solutions. You quickly grasp that vigilance is not just helpful, it is essential for survival.
A fringe aspect of medieval sanitation that surprises you involves the use of natural repellents and protective charms. Hanging bunches of dried herbs, sprinkling ashes, or placing stones in specific arrangements is believed to ward off disease, pests, or misfortune. While modern minds might scoff, there is a functional layer. Herbs often mask odors and contain antiseptic properties, while ashes can reduce moisture and deter insects. These solutions exemplify how observation, experimentation, and cultural belief intertwine. By the end of the day, your senses are fatigued. The air you breathe, the surfaces you touch, and the spaces you occupy carry reminders that human comfort is limited and survival is constant work. And yet, you also notice resilience and creativity. Villagers adapt to their environment, reusing resources, improvising solutions, and maintaining functional routines despite conditions that would overwhelm a modern human. Their lives are shaped by constraints, but they also display a remarkable ability to coexist with a world that is unpredictable, messy, and immediate.
As you settle into your straw bedding, exhausted from the sensory and physical demands of another day, you reflect on the lessons of sanitation and environment. Life in medieval times requires awareness, careful planning, adaptability, and a surprising tolerance for discomfort. You understand that comfort is earned, not given, and that the human body, mind, and spirit are tested in ways you never anticipated. Even in the chaos, there is method, resilience, and subtle ingenuity that allows daily life to persist.
You drift towards sleep, imagining how every step, breath, and precaution shapes existence. Hygiene, smell, disease, and resource management are no longer abstract concepts. They are immediate, pressing, and unavoidable parts of the medieval experience. The day closes quietly, leaving you aware of how far modern life has insulated you from such constant, sensory survival. By now, you might be wondering whether medieval life offers any respite at all, or if every day is a relentless negotiation with labor, hygiene, food, travel, night, and environmental hazards. And the truth is, even small moments of relief require effort, planning, and a healthy tolerance for imperfection. One of the clearest ways this plays out is in the realm of leisure and entertainment, which exist but not in the comfortable, on-demand way you're used to. Here, amusement is deeply intertwined with labor, resource availability, and social hierarchy, and it often comes in forms that are surprising, whimsical, or downright peculiar. For instance, Festivals are the lifeblood of communal enjoyment. They occur at specific points in the year, often linked to religious calendars, harvests, or seasonal milestones. You might expect a festival to mean hours of uninterrupted fun, but you quickly learn that preparation alone can be exhausting. Setting up market stalls, preparing food, decorating spaces, and rehearsing performances are all labor-intensive tasks, and participants rarely take breaks until the event officially begins. Historians still argue how inclusive such festivities were, whether peasants truly had free rein or if social pressures dictated participation. Either way, for those who attend, festivals are a rare opportunity to experience joy, community, and distraction from daily survival. Games and physical activities are also present, though far simpler than your modern expectations. Children play with hoops, balls, or basic board games carved from wood, bone, or stone. Adults may participate in archery contests, wrestling matches, or mock combat displays. The thrill comes not from sophistication, but from engagement, skill testing, and social bonding. You notice that even seemingly trivial games teach important survival skills: agility, strength, strategy, and awareness of surroundings. You imagine trying to play soccer with your modern brain and realize it would quickly devolve into chaos without careful attention. Storytelling, music, and performance provide another avenue for leisure. Minstrels travel between villages, performing songs, juggling, or reciting tales. These performances are both entertainment and education. Stories convey moral lessons, historical knowledge, and cultural memory. You might lean against a wall in the town square, listening to a lute's plucked strings, and feel the soothing cadence of words that connect generations. And yet, you quickly notice that audiences are not passive. They participate, critique, and influence performances with laughter, shouts, or applause, making each storytelling event a dynamic, communal affair. Food, surprisingly, can double as entertainment. Special meals or communal feasts occur on holy days, marriages, or harvest celebrations. These feasts are luxurious relative to everyday meals. Extra meat, baked goods, and ale flow freely. You imagine indulging in flavors that you rarely taste during the rest of the year, feeling a rare sense of abundance. Oddities sometimes make appearances. Pies filled with unexpected ingredients, sausages made with unusual spices, or decorative bread shaped like animals. These quirks, historians still argue, reflect cultural expression, culinary experimentation, and regional identity. You smile at the idea that a single meal could serve as both nourishment and spectacle. Religious rituals also function as a form of leisure, though not in the purely recreational sense. Pilgrimages, church festivals, and ceremonial observances provide rhythm, purpose, and a sense of wonder. Candles flicker, bells chime, incense drifts through the air, and songs echo off stone walls. Even when physically exhausting, these experiences bring mental and emotional respite. The spectacle, the structure, and the shared participation give life a sense of continuity that balances the relentless pressures of survival. For wealthier households, entertainment can be more structured. Hunting trips, music lessons, games of chess or backgammon, and commissioned performances occur, though always within the constraints of labor and status. You notice that even those with privilege still invest significant effort, time, and resources into what you might consider simple amusement. Luxury, in this world, is measured in time and space, not merely in material wealth. But the quirkier side of medieval leisure cannot be overlooked. For example, villagers sometimes engage in playful competitions using farm tools, chase games with livestock, or storytelling that borders on absurdity. Festivals occasionally include fool performances, where participants dress ridiculously, prank each other, or enact humorous plays. You can't help but imagine how these moments provide a psychological release, a way to process stress, test courage, or explore creativity within rigid social and environmental boundaries. Music and song are central to daily life as well. Work songs help synchronize labor, lullabies ease children to sleep, and simple melodies accompany communal events. Instruments are basic but functional. Flutes, drums, lyres, or stringed instruments appear, often handmade from local materials. Even without modern tuning or amplification, the sounds create rhythm, comfort, and emotional connection. You realize that music serves a practical purpose. It aligns effort, conveys messages, and strengthens communal bonds.
Finally, humor is surprisingly prevalent. Stories of tricksters, clever animals, or improbable events circulate widely. Villagers delight in exaggeration, wordplay, and practical jokes. Laughter is a small rebellion against daily hardship, a reminder that even in a world of scarcity and danger, joy exists in fleeting, precious moments.
As night falls once more, you reflect on the subtle beauty of medieval entertainment. Leisure is not guaranteed, easy, or constant, but it exists in layers: physical play, communal gatherings, food, music, ritual, and humor. Each moment requires attention, participation, and adaptation, but it also provides a reprieve from labor, an opportunity for connection, and a touch of delight in a challenging world. You understand that joy is present, but it is earned, shared, and deeply entwined with survival. Settling onto your straw mattress, you feel a mix of exhaustion and appreciation. Life is hard, unpredictable, and often uncomfortable, but it is also full of creativity, ingenuity, and fleeting pleasures that provide solace. You close your eyes, letting the rhythms of work, environment, and community wash over you, feeling a quiet sense of connection to people who endured, adapted, and even laughed through life centuries before your own time.
You wake for what feels like the 1000th day in this medieval rhythm, though of course it is just one more in your short-lived immersion. By now, your muscles, senses, and mind are finely attuned to the patterns of labor, food, travel, hygiene, night, justice, and leisure. And yet, there is one last aspect of daily life that quietly shapes existence: community and social obligations. Life in the medieval world is never solitary. Survival, comfort, and even moments of joy depend on relationships, alliances, and cooperation, whether you like it or not.
From the moment you step outside, the invisible network of expectations is palpable. Everyone knows everyone else, or at least their reputation, habits, and tendencies. Villagers help one another in predictable ways, like fetching water for neighbors, assisting with harvests, or caring for children when parents are occupied. But these obligations are not optional. Refusal or negligence can create social tension, suspicion, or even accusations. Historians still argue about the degree to which obligation versus personal choice drove these interactions, but your modern instincts quickly learn that politeness, humility, and discretion are survival skills. Social hierarchy is ever present, shaping interactions and expectations. The lord or landowner wields authority, but local customs, guilds, and elder councils regulate much of daily life. You notice that even small gestures, greeting correctly, helping a neighbor, or carrying the right amount of goods carry significance. Miss the mark, and you risk social friction that can ripple through daily life. You develop a quiet attentiveness, observing who interacts with whom, how favors are exchanged, and how conflict is managed. Social navigation becomes as essential as food or firewood. Community also dictates celebrations and shared responsibilities. Festivals, weddings, harvests, and religious observances require collective effort. Villagers work together to prepare feasts, erect structures, and maintain order during events. Participation is both a privilege and a duty. Absence can be interpreted as disrespect, laziness, or ill intent. Quirky practices abound, from playful competitions to symbolic rituals that outsiders might find confusing. You notice that even strange customs, like rolling large logs down hills during festivals or dressing animals in mock ceremonial garb, serve to strengthen bonds, teach cooperation, and create shared memories. At the same time, gossip, rumor, and social judgment are potent forces. People communicate information, true, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated,
in ways that can impact reputations and opportunities. You quickly learn that discretion is not just polite, it is protective. Words are measured, intentions observed, and appearances managed carefully. Surviving in this social landscape requires constant attention, and the mental effort is exhausting. Yet it also fosters awareness, empathy, and nuanced understanding of human behavior.
Religion further binds community together. Church attendance, prayers, and observance of holy days shape daily routines and interactions. Clergy often serve as mediators, educators, and moral guides, influencing how disputes are resolved and how community standards are enforced. Religious festivals offer respite from labor, moments of shared reflection, and structured leisure that reinforces communal identity. Even the most skeptical among you cannot help but notice the subtle comfort in these shared rituals. The soft candlelight, the hum of chants, the quiet presence of neighbors, all forming a network of invisible support.
Work, too, is social. Labor rarely occurs in isolation. Fields are tended collectively, workshops bustle with apprentices and masters, and market stalls require collaboration for setup, trading, and protection. You realize that nearly every task connects you to others, creating mutual dependency that reinforces social cohesion. Even arguments, disputes, or minor conflicts serve a functional purpose. They teach negotiation, patience, and strategy within a living network of people. Quirky and unexpected moments of communal interaction arise frequently. Villagers may hold playful contests during downtime, create impromptu performances, or develop humorous rivalries. Small acts, teasing a neighbor, sharing a meal, or decorating a space with humor, convey social intelligence, creativity, and emotional resilience. You notice that these lighter moments are vital, balancing the constant demands of work, survival, and societal expectation.
Yet the pressure of constant social visibility can be taxing. Personal mistakes are magnified, idle time is judged, and deviation from norms invites commentary. Privacy is scarce, and solitude is a luxury. You adapt by learning to blend in, anticipate expectations, and find subtle ways to carve personal space. Even your most minor behaviors are now informed by centuries of communal practice, though it takes conscious effort to internalize these norms. And in this web of labor, ritual, and obligation, you notice resilience in human nature. People endure, adapt, and even flourish under constraints that would seem overwhelming to your modern self. The interplay of obligation, cooperation, humor, and creativity produces a society that survives despite scarcity, danger, and unpredictability. Each shared meal, festival, ritual, or collaborative effort reinforces bonds that make hardship bearable and joy possible. By evening, as you lie on straw bedding for perhaps the final time, you reflect on how deeply interwoven survival and community truly are. Your modern instincts long for independence, privacy, and convenience, but here you recognize that these connections are life itself. Social bonds shape access to resources, security, knowledge, and even emotional well-being. You feel a quiet respect for people whose daily lives are inseparable from the shared rhythms of work, worship, and play. And now, as you settle into the slow descent toward sleep, the lessons of medieval life crystallize. Survival is not only a matter of physical endurance, cleverness, or labor. It is social, emotional, and adaptive. It is the careful navigation of rules, relationships, and expectations that ensures continuity, balance, and resilience. You allow yourself a moment to imagine the faint warmth of fire, the subtle sounds of animals settling in their stalls, and the quiet hum of life that persists even in darkness. The day, with all its challenges, slowly fades into memory. You feel the comfort of community, the rhythm of survival, and the quiet reassurance that even in a world so different from your own, life persists in remarkable, sometimes strange, and ultimately enduring ways.
You exhale deeply, letting the weight of understanding, empathy, and wonder settle into your mind and body. Now, your body softens, your breathing slows, and your thoughts drift like embers from a dying fire. Each sensory detail, every lesson of survival, and all the subtle human ingenuity you've observed settles gently into your imagination. This is the lull before complete rest, a slow fade from observation to immersion in your own peaceful world. Even as the struggles, smells, and unpredictability of medieval life linger faintly in memory, they no longer provoke fear or alarm. Instead, they weave a tapestry of human endurance and adaptation, leaving you quietly awed. You drift deeper, surrounded by the invisible threads of community, ritual, and perseverance, feeling the centuries of lived experience fold gently around you like a soft, protective blanket. And as sleep fully takes hold, you carry with you the lessons of resilience, ingenuity, humor, and social connection. Lessons that resonate long after the straw bed and flickering candle fade from thought. Now, as your body sinks completely into rest, the weight of medieval life begins to dissolve. The smells, the dirt, the labor, the challenges, they all fade into gentle shadows, leaving only the quiet rhythms you've observed. Your mind relaxes, imagining fires dying slowly in the hearth, the soft rustle of animals settling for the night, and the calm chorus of distant voices murmuring through villages. Every sensation slows, softens, and lengthens, like honey dripping through time. Even the lessons you've absorbed, hard labor, limited food, unpredictable nights, social obligations, and ingenuity born of necessity, transform into gentle whispers of resilience and creativity. They are no longer reminders of struggle, but subtle insights into human endurance, adaptability, and quiet ingenuity. You feel a deep sense of calm, understanding that people have thrived, adapted, and found moments of joy even in worlds far harsher than your own. Your thoughts float softly, unanchored by fear or urgency. The night air carries no threat, only serenity. You feel your muscles loosen, your mind slow, and your heartbeat align with the gentle rhythm of rest. Imagination drifts to soft candlelight, quiet music, and the warmth of community, not as challenge, but as comfort. And as sleep envelops you completely, remember, the world outside may be unpredictable, sensory, and demanding, but here, in this quiet space, you are safe. Let the cadence of centuries-old survival and human connection lull you deeper, carrying you gently into dreams where curiosity, empathy, and wonder continue to unfold. End of script. Sweet dreams.